everyone. Today we have a special talk. It's from the Innovators on Conference, and I talked to innovators from around the globe. And the talk was about what could the startup nation teach us about innovation. And I really enjoyed the talk, and I hope that you will enjoy it too. I want to say thank the facilitator, Diana Joseph. So let's start. Hey everyone, welcome to a talk about virtual events and the events industry and the future of people gathering. Welcome to Invincible Innovation Live Show. I am so glad that you're here. I am Mazor, Kario, product innovation and value creation expert. And I have two very, very special guests today with me, Daniel and Michelle. Daniel Moss and Daniel, I'll say it right, right? And Michelle Garrison, co-founders at We and Goliath. They help create virtual events with impact. Hi, Daniel and Michelle.
Hey, nice to
Hey.
meet you. Great to be on the show.
First, I'm so happy that we have the opportunity to talk because I got here late and I told you, I taught you how not to have a virtual event, and now we can start with doing something better than how I started. And I'm so happy to see both of you, and I'm sure it's going to be really interesting.
Well, no pressure, no blame for you. I would say the first tip is don't try and do it on your own. That's tough, right? So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, you're right. And we're live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, and you're so invited to join the discussion and ask questions. And now we can start. So let's start with the main thing that I'm really interested in. So, what are your thoughts about the future of the event industry right now when everything is remote and different than as it was like all the years before?
Yeah, so it's a big question. I'm sure we'll have a few things to discuss about it.
Sure.
Obviously events went fully virtual, and now many of them, let's say half roughly, are going back to hybrid. People are excited to be in person, but it looks like budgets are growing for both in-person and virtual. People are planning to do more virtual this year than last. So they're seeing the benefits of that. I think some of the main reasons for that include obviously the bigger audience, but also sustainability. That's one thing that we definitely hope to get more of a focus. Online naturally affects that. But as we go back in person, how do we create more sustainable in-person events? That's very key, right?
Yeah.
We're also just really improving our efficiency and analytics the data that we're able to gather in both virtual and hybrid events is a lot greater than the in-person events only. So there's a lot
Give me
more.
an example of analytics that we didn't have.
For example, we can see who's attended or who's visited which booth, who's clicked on various call to action buttons, who's met each other, and the things that they're talking about in chat, we can correlate with that person or the sessions that they're attending. We just have a lot more hard data rather than just assuming if somebody's wandering around at in person at a conference, it's much harder to track where people are going and what they're interested in.
So we already have that, right? That's like the current benefits of virtual. We could call it improved connections, improved networking using some AI or some data. But for the future of that, we think that you're going to have highly segmented and personalized content in events, especially things related to driving sales and sponsorship ROI, right? So in any marketing, the more targeted you can be with your audience and your message, the more effective it will be. So that's going to be happening within events for different themes, tracks, audiences, follow-up messages. And it'll also affect educational content with different people of different experience levels and interest levels to create more interesting content for everyone.
So with that, we can actually integrate it into a larger marketing campaign and score leads and understand, like not only what's happening at the event, but what's happening throughout the year with all of the different touch points that customer has experienced on their journey.
And it's sort of like events become a marketing channel.
Yeah.
Because of all the data that you have. And then I think the last big point that we want to share about the future of events would be the fact that because they're so much cheaper to attend and host, you don't have all the travel time, people can attend more events throughout the year. So Michelle is really passionate about helping people think about their event life cycle over the course of the customer journey. And do you want to speak about like the value of pre and post events, for example?
Yeah. So, for example, having a pre-virtual event and then before the in-person event gets people meeting each other, getting a better understanding about who they could meet at the in-person
Right.
event, maybe even having a conversation beforehand so that when you do meet in person, you're not starting at square one, you're further along in that conversation and you can really get more done at the main event.
Yeah, makes sense. I've been like before the pandemic, I've been traveling because as a speaker, I always selected the events that I wanted to attend to. And then I said I will speak there because I want to attend to the event. And so I'm on the other sessions, I'm going to listen. And so when you said it's so obvious for someone to be a sponsor or to be one of the main people who are interested in sharing their ideas, or a company wanting to share their information with potential customers or leads. But for the specific person, what you said at the beginning, so I really want to know who are the people that I'm going to meet. I want to go only to the best sessions that fit my needs and are interesting for me, right? And they're always like, there is this divide between like, I know 60-70%, maybe more, of talks that you go and you say, yeah, it's like something that I know. It's like, it's nice, but it's not that thing. And they're always like this thing that say, okay, this is what I came for. This is the interesting stuff for me, right? So the part of this like individually customized for me, but it's really hard to know what it is. So when you read the agenda, you never know what is like the good stuff for me. How do you do that?
Right. So let's say we've got all this demographic, psychographic data from people as they're registering. Then we can give recommended content based on those data points, recommended sponsors, recommended attendees. So let's take the burden off the attendee and use the data that we have to just, here's a recommended path throughout this conference based on what we already know about you.
Yeah, and even go as far as allowing the attendees to help to create the topics that will be discussed at the event by surveying them beforehand, asking them what they want to talk about or what they want to hear. And then we can really cater to attendees as opposed to just assuming that they're going to want to hear this stuff.
Yeah. So when you're talking about content, it really makes sense because I'm interested in a specific like topic, but it's more than that. It's like who is going to give the talk in many cases, right? There are like people who really are good at speaking, and there are people who are really smart and they have lots to say, and they are really experts in what they're doing, but they're not that of a speaker, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just thinking about rating the speakers.
Nice.
And like people like me rated it, like, like in booking, families said that and salespeople said that, right?
Yeah.
So
and
like,
maybe giving people more like highlight videos of past talks by that person, or get a preview of this session.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, and we do a lot of surveying after each session as well. And that way, like you're saying, we can get that data, and maybe next year that speaker doesn't get invited back, or they get invited back for a panel instead of their own talk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You can also use filters,
which is a bit like, you're not that good as what you think, right?
Yeah.
It can be painful. We could also use filters, right? Rather than just having a printed schedule, an online schedule can have filters for the type of session, is this a workshop or not? Does it have breakouts or not? What level of complexity is there? Is it beginner or expert? And that could also help you.
Yeah, and you can filter the attendees, of course, if you want to meet someone and he's in workshop or something like. If I'm a salesperson, I would be interested in that, I guess. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we're already getting that type of data for the workshop facilitators, for the expo booth managers, like who's attending your sessions, who's the most engaged, so you can follow up with those people who stayed through your whole session or who downloaded the most materials from your booth. So that level of follow-up customization from data is already there, and it's only going to get better.
So you already have these platforms giving you all this data, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you get great reports for each sponsor, for example. Like, here's your top leads to follow up with. That would be much harder to get in person.
Yeah, it's like exactly who you are and exchanging these cards and who he really is and how many like things he was interested in and how much time was he there and what kind of application or softwares platforms you have for these kinds of events.
Yeah, so there's different interactive conference platforms out there, dozens of them, that have this type of functionality. And the basic ones just have provide the content, but the maybe enterprise level things add on personalization, customization, white label branding, and this data layer, right? Some AI features.
And we can even run contests, for example, with the most engaged attendees, the people that have made the most connections or attended the most sessions. So we can gamify the experience.
And that's a great way to drive the specific actions that meet your business goals, right? So if you do have, let's say, a trade show style event, and you could incentivize people with different prizes for downloading booths and downloading materials from booths, requesting appointments in booths, visiting the most booths, and then your sponsors know, or well, they're going to see through the results that they're getting their money's worth because people they're trying to win. They like to win these types of things. They're competing. Yeah. So that really helps.
I see. And we talked about connections and networking. So how do you see virtual events like change and how people will interact with each other? It's it's very different when you have remote and like when I go to these events, I find that many of the most interesting conversations that I have, like is in the coffee break. It's not within the workshops, right? So how do you do that virtually?
Well, we're moving toward more highly engaging virtual events as opposed to just a presentation where somebody sits and listens. And it's really audience dependent, but I would say most audiences want to have more engagement, not only with the speaker, but with each other. So utilizing breakouts in a strategic way to really get people talking and forming more questions before the event that the presenter can present to the audience, as opposed to just having your slides and just giving us a talk. Instead, what questions can we form to the audience to get the conversation going, to get innovation really happening, and people excited to talk and share ideas with each other? So that's one direction that's really starting to take off. But then also there are tools that allow for some of that hallway discussion type feeling, like table-based networking, we call it, where it's more organic and people can just show up and hop into a table and have a conversation with those people, the people at that table, and then leave and jump into another one.
And I think the way to be improving that in the direction we're discussing is like those AI connection recommendations for the networking, as well as maybe inserting icebreakers into the table-based networking, more strategic themes for those things rather than just random connections. So you kind of know, not only are you discussing this theme, but you've been recommended to connect with other C-suite people or other marketing people at the event. And here's some icebreakers to start that focused conversation. So it's really speeding up, saving the time, finding the right people, having the interesting conversations that you want to have.
So I understand how it works in remote events and I understand how it works in real life events. So how do you do it in hybrid? Some people will really have coffee. Some people will be, without really coffee, or at least not from the barista that is there, right?
Right. Well, I mean, it's yet to be seen to what degree attendees really want to connect across the online in-person bridge. Right now, most events are focusing on bringing the content to both audiences, but networking usually happens mostly separated. Okay. because if you went to the in-person event, generally you're going to want to see in-person people. But I think the exception for that is when you have those really guided connections, that the really valuable connections. Yeah, okay. Even though I drove here, I'm gonna go into this little computer area and talk to this one person because we know that we have X, Y, and Z to talk about.
Yeah, I would say we're really excited about the opportunities for cross-pollination with the in-person and the virtual, because we're also moving into an era when the virtual component of a hybrid event may be much larger than the in-person component. So it makes sense to cross-pollinate these audiences.
Yeah. It's like when I think about this, like, the metaverse and the digital world, right? So once we have it in 3D, it's not supposed to be that different, like theoretically, than really meeting people. Do you think about this like direction or not?
I mean, so far, my feeling is that the metaverse feels really gimmicky, and more than virtual reality, I believe we will move to augmented reality. So instead of disconnecting from the real world in a virtual reality headset, where maybe we're forgetting to eat and take care of our bodies, and
Maybe.
make in a sort of a make believe personality or something. At least right now, I'm feeling the future will be more like glasses that add different data layers on top of the real world. So let's say you're at an in-person event. Maybe you're at a sporting event, for example. Maybe you're going to choose, if you're a really geeky person, to add a data layer on top of the event, and you can see all sorts of stats that you're interested in about different players. Or and your kid adds a cartoon layer on top of that sports things, and they see explosions and
Yeah.
rockets and capes on the sporting players.
Yeah.
Right?
It makes sense. It's like what you have in Instagram, that you have these glasses or a mustache,
Right.
and you have another layer.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are many places that you have like a photo booth in the event, right? And they have these costumes that you put on in order to have like a fun picture of people in the event, right?
Yeah.
So it makes sense.
Yeah. And so you're walking around a conference hall and you get all this virtual data on top of the doors that you're looking at, the different rooms or the tables. So before you know, if you want to enter that room, you can see how many people are in the room, what people rated that speaker in the past to take your point, or the different data points about those sessions, about those booths.
Or ideally, you're walking in the room and you see a group of people, and the person that has a similar interest as you lights up in a way, or maybe there's a glowing orb above their head. I don't know. I don't know what that's going to look like, but
yeah,
I think it would be great to be able to say, "Hey, we have a connection," and it kind of breaks the ice already to be able to walk up and say, "Oh, you were targeted in my connections," and
yeah,
a lot more
makes sense. So when we talk about events, we can include music concerts and festivals and sports and exhibitions and conferences, corporate events and seminars, and even more than that. So how do you think different markets will change in the future?
Yeah. So, I mean, I gave that sports example already. I think that would be a lot of fun.
Sports
I think
events.
similar
Yeah.
things will apply. Let's say you mentioned music. So let's say you're
Right.
walking around a festival. You have a lot of ground to cover at a festival. So through your festival app, you could see live versions of all the stages, and not only the content, but what are the people online and in person saying about these different sessions, either at a festival or same at a conference. Here's a live stream of the reactions, the insights, the photos, the video clips from the different content happening, and the perspectives of online versus in person. I think will be really fun to see as both
Yeah.
types of an audience explore and collaborate, share their
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah, that makes sense. But like, let's say like sports event, like a football game. So when you're going there, you have this energy of the crowd, right? So I'm not that of a sports lover, but I could imagine how it's going to like for you it's football, like in Israel it's soccer, but it's the same thing, right? So and you have this kind of a show, right? So you have this experience which is very, versatile with all your body, you hear everyone in surround, right, shouting, right? So it seems that in order for these events to be more immersive, people need to know how to create these events. As you said, like for the speakers to know to be more engaging, or for the musician know how to relate to all these like additional feedback that they're getting. Because if not, it will be so separate than the real thing, right?
Wow. Yeah, this is so fun to brainstorm with you here. So I think, one part of it is just creating an experience for the attendees to feel more engaged. So maybe at sports, people could be in real time. Maybe they have the ability to create their own little highlight videos, right? They can just clip their favorite play, choose their angle, and share it in a very
Yeah.
good way. Letting it be easy for your attendees at any type of event to share your content is so valuable, right? And the attendees love that. And then
you know what it reminds me of. I know that you have it in football. I think that the camera goes to the audience, and then they need to kiss, right? Something like it's in football, right?
Right.
You don't have that in Israel, I guess.
Okay.
But it's very similar, right? So if I create something that I'm like in the middle of the game, I'm seeing the game with friends, whatever, and I want to share it with everyone, it's very similar to this camera going to the audience and trying to capture these moments.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a service that we offer our conference clients often, is highlight videos. Okay. So we take out the favorite clips from different speakers in one session, give you a 2-minute or 1-minute video summary of an hour-long talk. What I think the next level could be letting the attendees, create their own ones very easily, so that you're multiplying your content. Your content gets thousands of shares instead of tens of shares if you make it really easy for everybody to share their own thing, customize it, make it very interactive, and then sort of collaborate on those.
Yeah, sure. It's like putting lighter fluid on brand ambassadors, just getting them out there talking much easier.
Yeah,
really
it
fun.
could be great for testimonials or people speaking about the event. And when I'm thinking about clips, I'm doing this show and I have 40 minutes each week, more or less, and just capturing what is interesting. It's so much work. It's so much work. I can understand someone doing a conference, or they want to engage with people who are less attentive, or they don't have the time, or they are bored, doing everything, listening to all the talks, and just want to get the highlights. So it's so important. There is this application, I think it's called Blink, right?
Okay.
So they take a book and they summarize it for you.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
Right?
Blinkist is one of them.
Yeah, maybe Blinkist. That's the name. So
that's one. Yeah,
that's the right
it's very
name.
Popular book summaries. It's sort of the same thing. And so let's make it really easy to share. And maybe the next level is, how do we let attendees collaborate on those highlights? So let's say you're at a conference. Okay. Sometimes in our conferences, we'll create shared note-taking opportunities. Right now it's very simple, like a doc or a Google Slides. Okay. But that could evolve so that you're adding in those clips, and then maybe there's a certain mind map thing. You can drill down to whatever detail you want, some shared decision-making processes. And let's really, especially in breakouts, workshops, high-level trainings, symposiums, make it so as an organization, you're showing, you're giving a path of, here's the stated objectives for your breakout. We've got a small group of experts together. And so everybody knows that they're being really appreciated, right? That the contributions that they have are going somewhere. And then they get very passionate about being involved, because it's not just posting a comment that disappears into the ether, but they're creating a white paper, or they're sharing making a best practice guide or a plan together.
When you say that, two things come to my mind. First, when I do the summaries, nobody could read that, even me sometimes. But I do all these small drawings that makes me remember. So maybe somebody would understand that, not my handwriting. I have a handwriting like a doctor, but I don't do doctor. I don't do MD, but I just know how to write like a doctor. And that's the one thing. And the other thing, sometimes they have an illustrator coming to these events, mainly design related events, right? And they have this illustrations, big illustrations of what was said during this talk. So that could be another way of expressing yourself, I guess, which is really interesting because I guess that people, they want to learn more, but when they engage, they learn much more. So engaging is first a way to really relate to what is said, and more than that, it's a way to relate to other people, to other connections that are available through this content. But sometimes when you see that you have this chat and
Mm-hmm.
it's going so fast, right?
Yeah.
I had these like experiences, and it's like so fast, and you cannot really read it. So you need a way just to capture what was said, because somebody like wrote something and it was really funny or bright, and then everybody said everything related to that, and you just don't know what was said, right?
Yeah. Some of the platforms we use let you upvote comments. And then maybe the next level is seeing a list of top comments very
Mm,
conveniently, right?
yeah,
But
makes sense.
you can also have assistants in the event that are just pulling out those comments as they go by, which makes it a lot easier.
Mhm.
And then you
Yeah.
can use that to create a highlight email after the event and send that out.
Mm-hmm. It'd be
Yeah.
nice to be able to do that in real time. Like here on this platform, by the way, if you're watching live, you can ask us a question. We can show it on
Right.
screen. But what if we could do that with top comments very easily, right? Oh, this comment got 10 posts and it's automatically brought into the presenter, and you could share that on screen. That'd be an
Right.
easy next step.
Yeah, I know that in many events, like in the past, and I know like maybe right now it's not that like innovative, but in the past they had these hashtags and they were connecting to Twitter, and they said like this is what was written on Twitter, so these are the most shared tweets that we have on the event and so forth. But I get that maybe
Mm-hmm.
right now there are like better options. So what are the common mistakes organizers make with virtual events today?
Yeah, if you want to take
Yeah,
that.
I mean,
Like
some of
first, don't be late. That's a
uh,
good thing.
yeah, okay, well, whatever. We forgive you.
Okay, okay.
One of the things is reading off of a script. That can be really challenging for
Wow.
attendees to
Wow.
listen to.
It's like the worst thing ever. Like somebody having the slides, which is like reminding himself what he says, and he reads it, which is like
Yeah.
the like it's awful.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and typically you wouldn't do that in person if you're presenting.
No,
So I
you
don't know
shouldn't.
why. Yeah, you shouldn't, but I don't know why people think it's okay to do online. I think that there tends to be a mental disconnect between presenters and the audience if they're not used to presenting online. And it is important to visualize and that there is an audience even in the room with you as you're talking, and just keep flowing with it. And also, if you are going to read notes, then put your notes up close to the camera so that you're looking into the camera when you're talking and not just looking down.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
furthermore, feel the meaning of the words. It's so important. If you have a script, don't read in a monotone voice, but put some energy and emotion into it. You can get away with it. It takes a little practice, but better than a
Yeah.
script would be an outline for sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because I talk like for many years, people come to me and they talk to me about how can I start with talking. So because sometimes they're a bit like reluctant to start like talking, like it's scary, right? So when I think about it, there is this balance between being really ready and knowing exactly what are the words in each like sentence that I want to engage with, and the other side is like being natural. And sometimes in virtual events it looks like, yeah, I can just read, I can just stick to the script, right? But it's even worse than live events, I guess, because it's already a bit like more apart than usual. So in order
Yeah.
to be more engaged and more connected, you need to be even more natural and more charismatic and
Yeah.
more like emotional and more,
I
and
totally agree. Yeah.
so it's
Yeah,
even more than that.
definitely. And attendees that are showing up to virtual events, they're in a more comfortable environment typically. They're more relaxed themselves. They're more authentic themselves. They haven't just rushed to get on a plane to travel, and they're not dressed up for the occasion necessarily. So that you need to meet that authenticity of your audience as well.
Yeah,
And
like I had the previous like 2 talks ago, I had someone who is like a trainer for TED speakers, and she said that in many cases you need to think about the emotion or to have something which is tangible while you're talking, like a story or something that they could relate to, or a feeling that they could relate to. And I think that when you're virtual, it's even more important because you don't have anything tangible in front of you, right? So you have this flat screen, and it's harder.
I always say it's important to frame the problem, whether it's for written copy or it's an online talk. Nobody really, you can't just jump into solutions. You can't just read off the script. Like, remind them why they're there. What's going to happen if they don't act on this solution, right? I used to lead self-development workshops for over a decade. And so we're getting people to, let's say, like stress relief workshops primarily. If you want to get somebody to change their behavior, you have to really emphasize what's going to happen if they don't, right? And so ask them, like, what's the result? How does stress show up in your life? And how big of a problem is that? And then exaggerate that, right? Yeah. So I would suggest to do the same.
This is the problem here.
Yeah, it's bigger than that, isn't it? Right? And you make it sound like humorously large, and then they're like, oh yeah, that's actually true. So let's do the same in events in a way. Applying that strategy would look like asking people, what are the challenges they face with this area? Where are they struggling? And then, make a little light of how big of a problem that actually is, because people usually understate it. And then they're getting you're pulling them in because you're asking them right at the beginning of the session, hey, I want to hear from you. Put it in the chat. What's the biggest thing you've struggled with? And they'll be like, oh, they actually care what I think. And then they're not waiting till the end of the session for Q&A. Okay. Right. And they love that. And you read it off and they're happy to hear you share.
Yeah. And that really brings me back to what I was talking about earlier, is working more on the questions that you're going to ask at that event, as opposed to just your presentation. So those questions become even more important. And then how are you going to structure those conversations? If you can break people out into smaller groups, then definitely do that. But if you're using the chat, you can still do a lot just with chat with the questions that you're asking.
Throughout the session, not just at the beginning and the end. Get a pulse as you go. Keep reminding people that this is live. You're there with them and you want to hear from them.
Right. Because that's the thing, because they would say, okay, so what's the difference between me seeing it right now than going to YouTube and seeing something that was recorded 5 years ago? So what is the gap here? So it needs to be different than usual video. And the interaction is the different thing. So what you're saying is actually training the speakers in order to be better in the live events and in virtual events and maybe in hybrid. So for me, just imagining hybrid, I've never done hybrid. I've done either or. It's like not both. And I think it's like a new way of interacting, actually, because when you see people, that's obvious. You see their faces. And for me, it's much more interesting and fulfilling as a speaker to see these people and to see their faces and to see what they're doing. But you have these like small squares. Most of the time, people don't open their camera. Even if you ask them, they'd just rather, sleep in their like sofa or whatever instead of opening the camera. But if you have both, just seeing like two different angles of I'm seeing there, these are real people, these are squares. How do you like tell speakers to relate to that, right?
So, I mean, that's a technical challenge, first of all, for companies like us, that to think through how do we get the right types of screens so attendees and speakers can see both audiences and when to bring them together and all of that. So once that's there, I don't think it's, we should present it in a way where it doesn't require a lot of thought, right? It's convenient for the speaker. It's fun for everybody to just know, oh yeah, we've got the online audience right here. And it's more of a strategic thing that I think we're focused on. Beyond that is like when to bring in that interaction with the audience, how to connect the two types of audiences, and why. A lot of people devalue interaction too much.
Yeah, and some of it is just simply placing the virtual screens where the live audience is so that the speaker is looking at both audiences at the same time, because it's really disjointing to have to turn and then to face either audience.
Yeah, sometimes you do it really large behind the audience. So you just look up over your in-person and you see this big
Yeah,
virtual
I
event.
saw that in Tony Robbins, one of
Mhm.
his events. I don't know if you saw it, but he
Yeah,
had these
the
really
whole wall.
huge screens
Yeah.
and it was like this wide all around him. And he
Yeah.
just was in the middle.
That's a
Eh,
fun way to do it. And then you can see people big enough that you can call on them. That's really a virtual experience, but you could bring that into hybrid as well.
Mhm.
Yeah. Another thing that is kind of obvious that in the past, if you need to have this like event, which is like a real event, you have this like stage and you have the lighting and you have everything ready. And now for a virtual event, you just need a small studio in order to make it much more impressive, right? And
Mhm.
the opportunities are there like easily. Like in the past, it was so much complicated, right?
Mhm.
Oh yeah, very much. I mean, we're talking mostly about the content here, but as a event production company, we of course care a lot about the production value as well. And that's one way to make your events more exciting. Uh, we especially do that in pre-produced content. So for the interactive content, let's keep it simple technically for everybody. But for your presentation style content, we like to pre-produce so we can add in full level of polish, including animations, background and introduction and logo animations and lower third animations, background music, tight cuts, clips of videos, B-roll, split screens. Like there's so much you can do to make it look TV
Right.
quality and really fun. And then we say, think about your interactivity ratio. So usually your presentation style content is the vast majority and interactivity is like an afterthought. But we say, try to make it about half and half or just increase the interactivity ratio to the degree where your attendees would want. Not just what you think is helpful, but what would your attendees really want? How much do they want to get in to the content, and then create those experiences where you're pulling on the wisdom of a crowd, you're connecting people, giving them time to contribute. And that, like going back to your previous point, that's what makes the difference of live versus pre-recorded, is that
And
interaction.
so we have a question from Daniel. Daniel to Daniel. Daniel is asking you, Daniel, uh, any
Uh,
example that you can share
yeah,
for
I'm
this kind of
losing the
event?
context because we're changing subjects kind of quickly here. I'm,
Yeah, and I
I'm
know it was
guessing.
like in here, but I guess it's like an example for an event that is working well as a virtual event, I guess. So Daniel, if you have like an elaborated question, just feel free to share it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just a overall, yeah. So I think let's take a few examples of the different types of things that we're saying. Like if you want to, for example, bring interactivity in a presentation style session, then you're going to be pulling on the chat, like we mentioned. And some examples, I give one, which would be share a challenge that you've had. But then you can keep interspersing that throughout the session. And we coach speakers to do this with things like, give me a +1 if you agree with me, or type in an emotion that this speaker made you feel, and you're a moderator, and then you celebrate that. Or you say, what's one solution that you've found in your professional experience to work with this challenge? Now we want to hear from all of you, and you read them out. Okay, so these are different examples how you can make your presentations more interactive. And then you want to speak
Mhm.
about how to make like those workshops and trainings more interactive.
Sure. Yeah. I think that with workshops and trainings online in breakouts, I think that one of the main things is just not dropping people into the breakout without giving them a really clear introduction to that breakout. So giving them a time frame of what they'll be, how much time each person in the breakout will be discussing, and a question that's very specific, and then keeping it kind of short, like 5 to 10 minutes, and keeping it to like 3 people, 3 to 5 people. Don't be afraid to do smaller groups so that they can each share. So then once they've discussed, they come back to the larger group, and then giving them opportunity to share out and this is like more in a Zoom meeting type of a format, but it would be a similar situation online, even in hybrid. For example, if we were breaking out the online portion and then also the in-person groups, and everybody was discussing together, then they could come back, we could hear from the online attendees, and we could hear from the in-person attendees.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Another creative example we did for a group of experts. It was like a foundation who's working on best practices for mental and behavioral health. And they wanted to pair people up to serve each other and support each other's needs. So we came up with them with something called an ask offer session. But instead of like in person, they would do this on maybe a big whiteboard. Here's what I need help with. Here's how I can help. And then people have to go and read and find things. So we used the data to match them up in advance to save time, and created an interactive wall that lives on indefinitely, where they can keep sharing their asks and their offers and make and have their contact info immediately there to connect in these very specific, actionable ways.
So basically, people were sharing this information when they registered, and then we were able to take that and plug it into a software-based solution.
Yeah, makes sense. So that's a great example. I hope that we answer, Daniel. If not, please let us know.
Please.
We're talking about engagement here. So, I have like 2 more questions, but I have one that just came to my mind. And I think for me, it's more important because I feel that we're going more and more virtual and more digital in everything that we do. It's not only in events, like our kids are always like in front of screens. Not too long ago, they even gave like the education and the school was online, right? And everything was online. And it makes me feel first like people are a bit like Zoom fatigue, a bit tired, right? And I even think that sometimes they are not really, and now we have yes, you did. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thanks
so
for the
happy.
question, Daniel.
Thank you. So, and it makes me feel like it's like something is missing for them. And sometimes they don't know how to even say it out loud, but maybe it's something that is like this real connection. And in your example for the last example that you gave is like, how do you really connect them and they will not feel alone in front of a screen in their home alone? So they are not lonely, but they're alone, right? Which is a challenge here, I guess. So for me, it's something that we need to just.
I agree.
What are your thoughts?
Well, thinking back, do you want to go first? Okay. So thinking back to my experience, like leading these stress relief workshops, community building workshops, I really felt when you pair people up into groups, or for me as a facilitator, the first person who shares sets the tone of the conversation. So as a facilitator or whoever's going first in a breakout, you have a big responsibility of leading with depth, leading with vulnerability, so that other people feel comfortable, right? So if you're setting up workshops, I would encourage you to have hosts in those workshops who set the tone that you want, who demonstrate. And I think vulnerability is a key part of that. Vulnerability is the key to intimacy. It's like, if you let yourself be seen, you can have this depth. So that's my main point on creating that real connection.
Well, I personally feel that if you give the right setting, it can be even more intimate online. Oftentimes, though, we don't allow space for that intimacy to occur, and we don't allow for the even meeting multiple times so that you're getting even deeper with the people that you've already met. So I think the part of it is just allowing for that space, even allowing for breakouts of 2 people. And you can do this in conference platforms as well, doing more of a chat roulette type of a system where it's based on a question and you're having discussions. I think that there can be more vulnerability, but you need to set the stage for it to happen.
Yeah. Like in many of the events that I'm going to and speaking in, it's like technical events, tech events. And it's like, it says 2 things. First, it says that there are more men usually in tech events. And second, it means it's technical. So vulnerability is out of the equation, right? And I think that sometimes it looks like it's not relevant to talk about emotions, vulnerability, something which is like, it's not the topic, it's not cognitive, right? And I think it's so important for people to be seen, to be engaging, to be related, connected. And it seems like sometimes it's missed in these kinds of events.
Yeah, I would also, I think one of the solutions for that is remembering to let our morals, our heart, our our vision, our purpose, drive the technology rather than just profits, right? And we've seen the fault of that taken to an extreme with Facebook and Instagram's algorithms driving people to body image issues, suicide, even definitely depression. You have to optimize things based on morality, not only on profit. And that takes vulnerable conversations. How do we want to create? What world do we want to create through this technology?
Yeah, and why
Right.
are we here today? What is our collective purpose? What is our individual purpose? We've also found that bringing in music that can
Yeah, that's a
really get you
great example.
yeah, just the getting in touch with the emotions both at the beginning of the event, throughout, in the middle of an event. If you want somebody to reflect on a question on their own, then play some music in the background.
Yeah, and get people moving. Have a little dance break, a yoga break.
Yeah.
Yeah, there hasn't been enough experimentation, in my opinion. I know we're growing leaps and bounds as far as what we can do, but I have noticed that on a lot of events, people are afraid to experiment because they're afraid it might flop.
Right.
But really, we're experimenting and we're innovating together, and that's part of what we're co-creating the future, right? So
Yeah.
if it flops, it's not the end of the world. You typically have a pretty forgiving audience.
Yeah. I two things. First, when you're innovating and you're doing something new for yourself and for others, it might fail and it's fine. So that's one thing. And it might be a really good success. And second, when you're saying that is like it's like we can do more than what you're doing, right? And as you said, like leading yourself with the heart. And sometimes we forget about it, especially when it's like technology or an event related to outcomes or to lead generation or whatever, just as we said. And it seems that it's more required, as I said, like because you need to be more charismatic and more engaging and more vulnerable in order to get this kind of connection. It means that you cannot relate to it like I'm the wise person on the stage, I'm teaching you, I'm the guru, you're the students, right? Yoda, right? So it's much more human in that sense.
It is, and you're really pulling on that wisdom of the crowd, the wisdom that the attendees bring to the table. And I mean, it's really one of the main reasons why we started this company to begin with, was because we saw the efficiency in innovation with virtual and hybrid events as opposed to only in person. And the things that we can accomplish when we can meet with people from around the world without needing to travel and take the time to be in person. And it's really huge when we think about like what can get accomplished together.
Sure. It's even heartwarming just to think about the potential of connecting people, really. So I have so many other questions now, I see, but so I want to thank you and ask you, how can people hear more about you and connect with you and ask questions and with your services?
Great, thank you. So again, we and Goliath, like David and Goliath, but we can't all be David on our own. Sometimes you need a team behind you. You need some extra tools, strategies, tips. So we like to think of ourselves as that secret weapon. So if you need some help with virtual and hybrid, we're at weandgoliath.com. And we're offering right now free strategy sessions to anybody to think about what they want to do with virtual, what's going to be effective for them, all these types of ideas that we're brainstorming. Happy to brainstorm with you. So just reach out from weandgoliath.com if you want to vision together, and we're happy to help you make more inspiring and impactful events, whether it's through the interactivity and the engagement side, or also we have 20 years experience with the design and marketing side. So if it's on the polish and the promotion, we do a lot there as well.
Wow. So I would say that I visited your website and it's really beautiful. So
thank you.
So, and I'm sure I'm sure that everyone that will just try what you're offering will be much more wise and insightful about the event that they could have. So thank you for that. Thank you
so much.
Daniel and Michelle. Daniel, I said, okay, Daniel, not Daniel.
Right,
Daniel. Okay. Like all through the event. And now, someone is talking and his name is Daniel too. So I'm thinking like, should I say it this way or Like, I think it was okay. Okay. So thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
You as well.
Likewise.
Thanks
Thank
again
you.
for having us on.
Sure. And to all of you change makers out there, thank you for joining us. And if you want to learn more about what I do and my work, just visit invincibleinnovation.com. And I'll see you next week with another innovative, insightful talk. See ya. I'm Mazor Kario, and you've been listening to the Invincible Innovation Podcast. Make sure to visit our website, invincibleinnovation.com, where you can learn more about our programs and my book, Innovating Through Chaos. I'll be waiting for you next week in our next episode. Thank you for listening.